Hello and welcome to the Christ Baptist Church devotional. We finally got back online with all the technical problems that we've had with the camera and the internet, but now we're here and we're in Genesis chapter 23. We've been going through the book of Genesis, the life of Abraham, and how God has grown his faith from Genesis chapter 12, going up through and seeing how this man who really was an idolater, didn't know God at all, and God called him out and grew him in faith to where he established that a man is justified by faith, just in believing what God has revealed, and to believe, and God credits it as righteousness and as a foundation for all of Scripture, all of what we believe, which is the gospel. And so after that, God has promised Abraham land and descendants, and promised to be with him, which he did. He protected him, protected his wife Sarah in many situations, as we've learned from chapter 12 to 22. And now here we are in basically, it's actually 23. And now we're here in Genesis chapter 24, dealing with Isaac, who is now ready for a wife. We just saw in 22 where basically Isaac was asked to be sacrificed, or God asked Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac on the altar and bring him back to where Abraham understood. God demanded a sacrifice of the very thing Isaac loved, but God also provided, through the angel of the Lord, provided a sacrifice, a sacrificial substitute for what God had demanded, to keep the promise. And so Abraham's promise that he had from God carries on now through Isaac. And Genesis 23, when we just finished there, the death of his mother, Sarah, who was 127 years old. Basically, Isaac was 37, so he's almost 40 years old now. But it's time for him now to look for a wife, and he's had to wait 40 years before he could get a wife and some children. So all about this faith is all about waiting on God and his promise. Well, we're going to go through chapter 24. It's quite long, and I don't think we need to read every verse. It's much repetitive. But just to get into the main points of what's happening, and we can learn some key lessons here about God and his promise in Genesis 24. So we start with verse 1. Now Abraham was old, advanced in age, and the Lord had blessed Abraham in every way. And he sure did. Abraham was very wealthy in terms of animals, flocks, goats, water, land. And Abraham said to his servant, the oldest of his household, who had charge of all that he owned, please place your hand under my thigh, and I'll make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of earth, that you shall not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live. But you will go to my country and my relatives and take a wife for my son Isaac. So he says, I don't want you to find a wife for Isaac from the people here, the Canaanites. Those are the people that God's going to throw out. But go back to my family. Go back to someone who's not a Canaanite, someone that we can kind of know, and take a wife for my son there. And he puts his hand, that's an expression, put my hand on my thigh, which means subject yourself to me and accept this assignment. So that's what he said. But the servant had a question. He said, suppose the woman's not willing to follow me to this land. What should I take your son back to the land from where you came? So if the woman doesn't want to come with me, do I need to take Isaac back there? And he said, no. Verse 6, Abraham said to him, beware that you don't take my son back there. Do not take my son back there. Why? Well, let me just read here and then explain. He said, beware that you don't take my son back there. Verse 7, the Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house and from the land of my birth, and who spoke to me and who swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land, he'll send his angel before you, and you'll take a wife for my son from there. So the Lord, the God of heaven, took me from my father's house, land of my birth, and he said, to your descendants I'll give this land. This is the land that he's going to get. I don't want him to leave this land and go back to my family's house, because he's going to see family, he's going to get excited, he's going to want to stay there. And anytime you get married to the wife's going to want to be around her mom and her dad, and they're going to want to stay there, and you won't inherit the land. The issue is Abraham saying, God's going to be faithful to give us this land. I want Isaac to stay here in this land. So no, he cannot go back there. But if the woman is not willing to follow you, then you will be free from this my oath, only do not take my son back there. So the servant placed his hand under the thigh of Abraham his master and swore to him concerning this matter. So that was the agreement. Send a servant on a mission, find a wife. I don't care what family, don't care what she looks like. Find the wife that'll be the right one for Isaac. So the servant, he gets loaded up. Abraham was very wealthy. So he got loaded up. He took 10 camels from the camels of his master, set out with a variety of good things of his master's in his hand, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia to the city of Nahor. So he went back to where Abraham's family was. He made the camels kneel down outside the city by the well of water at evening time, the time when women go out to draw water. He said, O Lord, the God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show loving kindness to my master Abraham. Behold, I'm standing by the spring, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Now may it be that the girl to whom I say, please let your jar down, or let down your jar, that I may also drink, and who answers, drink, and I'll appoint your camels also, may she be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac. And by this I'll know that you have shown loving kindness to my master. Now this poses a question. Is it right to give all kinds of tests? You know, oh, God, I'm not going to make a decision unless you tell me this one or that one. I'm going to lay a fleece out like Gideon did. Should we be doing that? That's a question maybe many people would ask. The answer here is, well, this servant has been given an impossible task. And he wants to be honoring of God and honoring of Abraham. He's told find a wife. He doesn't know where to start. He doesn't have any idea. It's outside of his power and ability. He's saying, God, I'll set a condition that I'll wait for that condition to be met. So he's not saying, God, I'm going to make you pass this test. He's saying, God, I'm not going to make a move unless I see that your hand is in this. This is the only way I can know if your hand is in this. If I see a girl showing some level of interest, she'll be a servant, she'll be a caring person, someone who has the right attributes. Lord, let me see that. If I don't see that, I'm not moving. You see, he's not picking the right one or the left one or the green one or the red one. He's saying, until I see one with godly characteristics, which you will provide, I'm not making a move. So a fleece is not necessarily what we want to do. We don't want to put God to the test, but at times when you don't know what to do, you have nothing at all to do, you say, Lord, you've got to give me something here, and I'll wait. I'll not do anything until this condition, which appears to be following your will, would be met. So it's okay to wait, for sure. Notice verse 15. Notice these words right here. So he didn't just wait around and say it. It said before he had finished speaking. Before he'd finished speaking. He's praying. Verses 12 to 14, he's praying. So just like in Daniel, before he's actually done with the prayer, that's how God answers. Before he'd finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, came out with her jar on her shoulder. So Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, the son of Milcah, the wife of Abraham's brother Nahor, so Abraham's brother's son's son. So it's basically his nephew's son had a child. And the child was Rebekah. And Rebekah came out. And it makes sense that it would be someone that young because Abraham, remember, he's 100 and essentially, let's see, he's 130, 140 years old. So, I mean, she needs to be someone a little bit young because Isaac is 40. So we're talking 100-year difference here. So it needs to be his nephew's son's son. So that would be down the line. That makes sense. So before he finished speaking, here comes Rebekah. Girl was very beautiful. Notice that. Very beautiful, a virgin, and no man had relations with her. And she went down to the spring, filled her jar up, and came up. So some interesting markers are there to tell us how this is a perfect woman to meet God's promise. Perfect woman to meet God's promise. Beautiful for Isaac's benefit. Virgin, it's going to be a pure child for the seed to flow through. Whom she'd had relations with no man, there's no problems with other people, family, and all of that. So she came up and she said exactly what the servant asked. The servant ran to meet her and said, "Please let me drink a little water from your jar." She says, "Drink, my lord," and she quickly lowered a jar to her hand and gave him a drink. Now when she'd finished giving him a drink, she said, "I'll draw also for your camels until they have finished drinking." So she quickly emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw and drew for all the camels. Meanwhile, the man was gazing at her in silence to know whether the Lord had made his journey successful or not. The man heard these words and immediately heard, "This is of the Lord. She's saying exactly what I said." And so he says, "Let it be that the girl to whom I say, 'Please let your jar so I may drink,' if she says, 'Here, and I'll water your camels as well.'" That's exactly what she said. "I'll also draw for your camels." So he's staring at her saying, unbelievable. The Lord answered so quickly. So when the camels had finished drinking, the man took all of these jewelry and stuff and things that would be very pleasing gifts, and he gave them to her. Verse 23 says, he asks, "Whose daughter are you? Please tell me, is there room for us to lodge in your father's house?" And she said, "I'm the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Milcah, whom she bore to Nahor." So, related directly to Nahor, who was the brother of Abraham. So wow, a descendant 3 generations down from the brother of Abraham is set to be the wife of Isaac. So the man bows low, verse 26, and worships the Lord. And then he immediately then gives this testimony. So he said, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham." He didn't say, "Blessed be Abraham." He said, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not forsaken his loving kindness and his truth toward my master. As for me, the Lord has guided me in the way to the house of my master's brothers." So he tells her, "I've been looking specifically for a wife, and my master Abraham has sent me." Well, as soon as that happened, Rebekah, she had a brother whose name was Laban. We'll find about him later. But she had a brother, and Laban ran outside to the man at the spring, and they talked, and he showed him all the gifts that he had. And so they invite him in. And the man enters the house, and so Laban takes care of the animals, and he introduces who he is. So we get a long section here where it's somewhat repetitive, where they're trying to say, now what exactly happened? And so basically verse 33 and 34, they wanted to set food for him to eat, and he said, I'm not gonna eat till I get done telling you what I gotta tell you. And so he begins in 35. In 34, I guess, he begins. "I'm Abraham's servant," and then he begins to explain. "Sarah, my master's wife, bore a son to my master in her old age. He's given him all that he has." So my master Abraham, very wealthy, and Isaac is going to be his heir. "And Abraham made me swear to go to the land of his family and to find a wife for my son." He says that in verse 38. "She'll go to my father's house and to my relatives and take a wife for my son." And I asked him, I said, "Well, suppose the woman won't follow me." Verse 40. Now here's something new that was revealed. He said, "The Lord, before whom I have walked, will send his angel with you to make your journey successful, and you'll take a wife for my son, for my relatives, and for my father's house. Then you'll be free from my oath when you come to my relatives. And if they do not give her to you, you'll be free from my oath." So this is all you have to do, is just go there. The angel will lead you, and you will be spot on. After that, you're released. So then, he said, that's what happened when I went. So now I got here, and so verse 42, he begins to explain, now here's what happened. And he said, "I'm standing by the spring," in verse 43. "It may be that the maiden who comes out to draw, to whom I say, 'Please let me drink a little water from your jar,' and when she says, 'If you drink, I'll draw for your camels also,' let her be the woman whom the Lord has appointed for my master's son." And notice he even acknowledges in verse 45 exactly what happened. "Before I had finished speaking in my heart." So he was praying in his heart. He was just thinking about that. And before his conversation with God got done, she comes and says, "Drink, and I'll water your camels also." So I drank, and she watered the camels. So I immediately pursued. And I said, "Whose daughter are you?" And she said, "The daughter of Bethuel, Nahor's son, whom Milcah bore to him." So I immediately said, here, you get these gifts, you get everything, because you are the woman. And so his question then is, in verse 49, so now if you're going to deal kindly and truly with my master, tell me. And if not, let me know that I may return to the right or turn to the left. I mean, so let's get the answer right here, right now, because I've just told you, I've been guided by the Lord. This is very clear, but it's still in your hands. You got to let me know. So Laban, her brother, and Bethuel, her father, said, the matter comes from the Lord, so he cannot speak to you bad or good. They just saw right away there's something in this. So they said here, it's an arranged marriage. Abraham's in the family. This makes sense. Here's Rebekah before you. Take her and go, and let her be the wife of your master's son, as the Lord has spoken. So this is what you can do. You can take her. So the servant is very excited. Servant again brings out articles of silver and gold and garments, gives them to Rebekah, and he also gives to the brother and the mother and everybody. Everybody wins. He just gives them all of Abraham's stuff. And so verse 54, then he and the men who were with him ate and drank and spent the night. And when they rose in the morning, he said, send me away to my master. Let's go. We've got to get back. Well, as always, whenever there's this parting due to marriage, in-laws, and that has a tough time separating. But her brother and mother said, let the girl stay with us a few days, say 10, afterwards she may go. Like 10 days, like 2 weeks. Let her stay 2 weeks. Like, whoa. I traveled a long way to get here to find a wife and bring her back, and now you're saying I got to wait 10 days? Ooh, that's a problem. So Abraham, his servant, says, do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go up to my master's. He's strong and resolute. No. The deal is, once I find him, we go. And they said, we'll call the girl and consult her wishes. So let's let the girl make the decision. Kind of a fair thing. You don't want to have a girl go to find her husband whom she's never met, and then she really hates you for doing it. So we consult her. So they called Rebekah and said to her, will you go with this man? And she said, I will go. Look at there. No fight, no explanation. I will go. 3 words. I will go. Thus they sent away their sister Rebekah and her nurse with Abraham's servant and his men. They blessed Rebekah and said to her, may you, our sister, become thousands of 10,000s. May your descendants possess the gates of those who hate them. Then Rebekah rose with her maids, and they mounted the camels and followed the man. So the servant took Rebekah and departed. So off they go. Back to the land of Canaan. Here comes the wife that God has prepared. So that's all the action that's taken place. And it's pretty simple. Abraham said, I take a servant, time to get a wife for Isaac, but go to my family, don't take it out of the land of Canaan. Those are the people who are going to get kicked out. Those are the ones God is upset about. Those are the ones that God had seen get cursed by Noah. So they're on their way, and now they're moving back to Canaan, where Abraham is. And here's what I want you to see here in verse 62 and 63. Now Isaac had come up from going to Beer Lahai Roi, for he was living in the Negev. So that places Isaac here. And Isaac literally is pretty much close to 40 years old. Had no wife, no relationships, no social structure. But knowing there's a promise that out of his, Abraham said, there's going to be so many descendants, it's more than the stars of the sky. He had to have told Isaac that, because out of Isaac, the promise will come. Nobody else. Not Ishmael, anybody. And so Isaac's saying, okay, if it's going to come out of me, I need a wife. And he's been waiting 27 years. Actually, it was 37 years before his mother died, but probably in his late 20s, he had almost been killed by his father. He's had his relationship with his father and his mother, but not girls. Notice verse 63. Isaac went out to meditate in the field toward evening, and he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, camels were coming. He went out to meditate, and I'm sure he did this more than once. Went out to meditate. And you know what he's meditating on? The promise. The promise. God had promised Abraham sent his servant out. So now he's thinking, what kind of wife? What do I do? How do I be a husband? How can I be the right husband? How's this going to work? I'm 40 years old. Meditation. Meditation on the promise is what's coming. Meditating on the promise. And then Rebekah looked, he lifted up her eyes, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from the camel. She said to her servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" And the servant said, "He's my master." She then took her veil and covered herself, so she knew this is Isaac. This is it right here. There's no like preliminary meet a lot of people in the family and all that kind of thing. No, you go to the right and you see Isaac. So she covered herself. She said, "Ooh, it's not right. He's not supposed to see me." The servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. So everything was squared away. Everything was done properly. Everything was done culturally the right way. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Thus Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. So, no doubt, after being in his 20s, when he was almost killed by his father, but because of what the Lord had said, and that tightened the bond between Abraham and Isaac, but he was still close to his mother, who only had the one child, for at least 10, 12, 13 more years, until she died at the age of 127, when Isaac was 37 years old. He loved his mother. It's the only real female companionship he had. She's gone. And you know what God replaces that with? A wife. To now be a permanent connection, a permanent relationship for Isaac. And it was a great blessing to both of them as they both were waiting. She knew this was of the Lord, so she went right away to meet. And then as soon as she heard that was Isaac, she says, "I'm going to be exceedingly respectful." She understood there's a great, precious treasure here. Isaac was meditating in the field about what is this promise? How's it going to look? How's the family going to work? And will it actually come to pass? Will the servant come empty-handed? I'm meditating. I'm thinking of the promise. I'm thinking about what God is going to do. And when you do that, when the promise comes, it's like it takes your breath away. When I think about the promise, and I know about the promise, and I'm anticipating the promise, it's like, Same thing happened. Same thing happened we can get out of the book of Luke. And that happened as well with two people who had decided to really focus on the promise of God. Verse 25 of Luke chapter 2, there was a man in Jerusalem whose name was Simeon. This man was righteous and devout, looking for the consolation of Israel, and the Holy Spirit was upon him. And it had been revealed to him by the Holy Spirit that he would not see death before he had seen the Lord's Christ. He's thinking about that promise. And he came in the Spirit in the temple, and when the parents brought in the child Jesus to carry him out for the custom of the law, he took him into his arms, blessed God, and said, "Now, Lord, you are releasing your bondservant to depart in peace. For my eyes have seen your salvation according to your word, which you have prepared in the presence of all peoples, a light of revelation to the Gentiles, and the glory of your people Israel." And his father and mother were amazed at the things which were being said about him. And Simeon blessed them and said to Mary his mother, "Behold, this child is appointed for the fall and rise of many in Israel, and for a sign to be opposed. And a sword will pierce even your own soul, to the end that thoughts from the hearts, many hearts, may be revealed." Simeon was waiting for his life because he was told, you won't die until you see the Lord's Christ. So that's a promise. So you know what? Every day goes to the temple. Is today the day I see the Lord's Christ? Is today the day I see the Lord's Christ? And when it came, it was like, wow. God gave that to him. Those who are looking for his promise get blown away when it comes. Those who are not looking for his promise, they might believe it. They might see it, but you're going to miss it when it's right in front of you because you're not looking for it. There was also a prophetess, Anna, the daughter of Phanuel of the tribe of Asher. She was advanced in years and lived with her husband 7 years after her marriage. And then as a widow to the age of 84, she never left the temple, serving night and day with fastings and prayers. You know what God says? At that very moment she came up and began giving thanks to God and continued to speak of him to all those who are looking for the redemption of Jerusalem. See, when you're looking for God's redemption, when you're looking for the promise of God, when you're looking for God's promise through his goodness, when it comes, you see God so clearly and are blown away. Because God comes in his timing, not yours. And it's all going to come very specifically. And for that, we understand here, Abraham sending someone to get a wife for Isaac. Isaac now meditating and receiving the wife. Seeing and experiencing the realization of God's promise. That's Genesis 24. Hope you join us again now for Genesis 25.